I mean, if you count all the radio years and the radio show was much more much more explicit than the TV show. I mean, it's like you know, uh, Miss Kitty was definitely a whore in the radio show. And Matt was definitely, enjoying some time with her because, Matt would come back from the road and get off his horse and say, "Where's Miss Kitty?" You know?
I saw the special and I got a little teary-eyed a couple of times with Roger being on stage and just being so amazing. Uh,
Roger was so great. He was so great.
he
Um,
was.
yeah, I mean, 97.
And he's more with it than I am, I tell you what. So, well, and one thing I wanted to talk to you was the fact that the amount of affection that you have for him is obvious. And I just was curious, what was the first movie of his that you saw that really stuck with you?
Roger discovered me. He discovered. I reviewed one of his films in the early '80s, and he got in touch with me.
Wow.
And I said, Roger, they don't ever screen your movies for me. I have to like review them late. I have to go to the drive-in, watch the movie, and then review it late. And he said, well, I'll take care of that. He says, you call my sub-distributor in Dallas, and he will, you go in early in the week. And I said, and Roger, do you have press kits? And he said, well, just tell Charlie if you want to still from the movie, just tell Charlie to cut out a frame and splice it back together, and I give you the frame. And so that's how Roger did his press kits. And I took advantage of that. I took the
Yeah.
frames of the movie. Forbidden World had come out about I don't know, 6 months earlier. And we were walking, he was giving me a tour of his lumber yard, his studio, which was a former lumber yard, and it still said lumber yard on the street. Uh, and they hadn't changed any of the exterior of the lumber yard, and so there were piles of debris everywhere. And we're walking past a pile of debris, and I just go, Roger, is that the mutant from Forbidden World over there in the pile of debris? And he goes, well, yes, I believe it is, Joe Bob. Apparently he wasn't needed anymore. And I said, Roger, you can't throw away the mutant. You need to rescue the mutant. And but that's the way he was. Once the movie was over, the movie was over. you know, he had two standing sets in his studio. He had a spaceship control room, and he had a strip club.
That somehow makes sense. It makes sense. Well, and kind of along with those lines too. Many years ago, you gave me a great bit of advice on writing, and within this episode and this special, we really get a glimpse into how long you've been doing this and how many people you've spoken with as well. I mean, you're as equally a legend as Roger. Um, Over the years and the people that you've talked to, who gave you uh, two people that gave you advice, and what was that advice that really stuck with you through that time?
Wow. I'm trying to think if anybody ever gave me advice. People don't tend to give me advice. Uh, I remember, I would say Zachary gave me some advice. Um, I worked with Zachary 3 or 4 times, and I remember he said to me, Joe Bob, it's a long road in this business, and sometimes they like you, and sometimes they don't like you so much. And he says, never be afraid to lower your rate. And I said, what? He says, don't be one of these guys that gets famous and then you keep your rate so high that you end up not working, you know? And
Good advice.
and that is true. And I have always done um, low income jobs. Even when, I actually all the time, not just when the show is popular, but I've done low income jobs, free jobs for that matter, because Zachary told me, uh, don't become too important that you won't do those free jobs or those low pay jobs, And I think that is good advice because we're all in this get together. I've gotten a lot of. I mean, Roger always gave filmmaking advice. I mean, probably the number one principle that Roger taught was, when the monster is dead, the movie is over. He would not. He would not tolerate any scenes after the monster was dead. And so,
Yeah,
so, and
that
I
could be
actually
applied to
think
a lot of things.
I actually think that's pretty good advice. That's the image you want in your head when you leave the theater. You don't want the image where there's four people sitting around a table having cocktails discussing the dead monster.
It's the dead monster. That's fantastic. Well, and one thing, of course, Zachary is one of the icons, and I was curious about your thoughts on how you're not just a horror host. You go through all the genres, but it seems like there's been this return of the hosts for films over the last decade because of streaming and access like that. And I was curious what you thought about that and how great that is for fans.
The return of hosting.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I mean, hosting never totally went away, but we need hosting now because streaming is so confusing. There's just too much to choose from. There's too many movies. There's too many genres. I mean, you can. We're in an era, and I don't think this will last forever, but we're in an era where you can literally pretty much watch any movie that's ever been made. You might have to work hard for some of them, but you can pretty much find any movie. I don't think that's going to last forever.
No.
The people that control the cloud are not going to let that last forever. But while we're in that space, people need curators. People need guidance. Otherwise, everyone's going to put aardvark as the first word in their title so that they'll be first on the menu. It's like there's no way to when you're just looking at menus all day. There's no way to tell what movies are watchable and what movies are not watchable. You have to have some source that you go to to determine what you like and what you want to watch. And fortunately, a lot of people go to us. Not specifically because of the movie we show, but because of the way we talk about the movie and the other movies that we refer to when we're talking about that movie. We can send people down rabbit holes, and so that's why I think that's why hosts are valuable.
Well, and that kind of goes along to another question I had for you, which is, you were talking, the Corman University was brought up, and I went to Joe Bob University growing up, and I was curious if you ever had thought about doing something online, which was a Joe Bob University, where you would just basically be you going on rants for however long the class would be. But I learned so much from you on these episodes.
Well, interesting you should mention that because we are doing Joe Bob Summer School this year. So this is something we used to do on Monster Vision, but we're going to bring back Joe Bob Summer School. So, but of course, that's kind of like, when I show a time travel movie, I lecture on the second law of thermodynamics and things. So it's really not movie related so much. But yeah, I mean, I'm happy to rant anywhere. People always say that I should do a podcast, and I don't know if I can work that hard. I already work hard enough just to do these, hosting of the movies. And so, but on the other hand, a podcast would give me the chance to talk about a lot of things I can't talk about on TV. The Darcy runs a Patreon. She's rehabbing all the old shows, and she uses the money from the Patreon to rehab the shows. Rehab, whatever the name is, restore.
Restore.
Anyway,
I know we need rehab sometimes.
and so once a month, we do a watch along, and I've been able to do some of my enthusiasms that I would not be able to do on the regular shows. So, for example, we did a watch along that enabled me to talk about John Meston. John Meston is a writer who nobody remembers because he spent his whole career writing Gunsmoke episodes, both radio episodes and TV episodes, and he wrote some of the greatest ones. Well, I mean, he probably wrote 80% of all the episodes, but he wrote some great dramas, sort of like people don't remember these TV guys, but we watched a couple of those, and it was like, wow. And people don't realize how subversive Gunsmoke was, especially when it first came out. And so it allows me to go in an area like that, and that obviously we couldn't do on the last drive-in. And so probably if I did a podcast, it would be stuff like that. I mean, it would be
Listen to it.
weird character actors from the 50s who deserve more credit.
That would be amazing. I would watch the heck out of that. I caught an episode of Gunsmoke randomly on TV the other a couple months ago, and it was one where James Arness was taking this prisoner, and they found this woman, and I guess he'd killed her family or something to that effect, and they were having to travel together and had to keep her alive, and it was really good TV. I grew up watching Gunsmoke.
Yeah, every episode of Gunsmoke was about how fragile civilization is and how only people that break the rules can preserve it.
Yeah.
And that idea is so strong in the American imagination that that's what kept it running for 20 years, 25 years. At one time, it was if you count all the radio years, and the radio show was much more much more explicit than the TV show. I mean, it's like, Miss Kitty was definitely a whore in the video show. And Matt was definitely, enjoying some time with her because, Matt would come back from the road and get off his horse and say, "Where's Miss Kitty?" And Doc was a total drunk. It was a lot of the plots were based around Doc not being able to perform his medical duties because he was drunk, and so you had a picture of the Old West that was flawed human beings trying to build civilization, and that's what made it so strong. And then of course when they went to network TV, they had to soften all that. But I think most people knew that Miss Kitty was a madam, don't you think?
I would hope so, because of some of the outfits that she did wear. Why not Gator Bait versus Hogzilla?
Oh my God.
Come on. It begs to be done.
Oh God. Hogzilla. Oh boy.
It won't die.
Somebody should do a real Hogzilla.
I think that would be great.
With a real hog. With a real monster hog. There have been some killer pig movies. It is like a sub genre of
oh yeah,
killer farm animals.
Razorback. Never forget Razorback. But I was asked to ask this of you really quickly, and I'm going to get in trouble because I know I'm going to go over, but I had to ask, what was it like to be screamed at by Robert De Niro in Vegas?
Oh, well, I was a little intimidated by him at the time because he doesn't talk very much. And so I was, trying to make conversation with him and not getting very far. And he um, he said, when we got to the scene where he's going to scream at me, he says, "Joe Bob, I want you to do me a favor." I said, "Okay." He says, "When they're doing my close up, you know, they're not seeing me at all. They're just seeing him in the close up. I want you to get up in my face, get right up in my face, and and yell your dialogue at me, so I'll react to it, because I really want to, hate what you hate. I really want to hate what you're saying." And he says, "And then after lunch, when they turn the camera around and do your close up, I'll do the same for you." And I was like, "Oh, I don't want to
Right. Oh my God. Well, so Bob, thank you again. This has been a pleasure as always talking to you, and thank you for keeping on doing this and keeping the mutant family alive. We love you. So,
Well, thank you.
if you couldn't tell,
I'll see you at some con for sure, right? You still go to
totally will.
Okay.